YouTube, what's going on? What's happening? As always, I am Hadou Kid, and today I want to talk to you about Gears of War. If you don't know, I'm a pretty big Gears of War fan. I've been playing Gears since the very first game, and there's something about Gears as a franchise, the gameplay, the mechanics, the characters we've grown to know and love, and just a lot of the nostalgic moments over the last decade or so. Something about how Gears has mixed in with that and just been a big part of, I think, my life, and I'm assuming a lot of you guys' lives as well. Now, I know the games have changed a lot over the years, and some of them have been considered more top tier classics versus others that didn't necessarily hit the mark. But as a Gears of War fan, I still find myself coming in and out of Gears 5, going into matches, linking up with a couple buddies and just playing as if it was back in 2006 or whenever the first game came out. And while I'm playing this game and getting a bunch of kills or thinking about rage quitting, I can't help but think about what the next game is going to be like. Now, I know they haven't said anything officially about Gears 6 yet, like what it's going to be about, when it's going to come out, or even if it's going to come out. But as I play through these matches and I think about all the things I've seen in Gears games and overall what the fans have talked about, it made me wonder, what are some things that could go into Gears 6 to really make it that game that really wraps it up, brings it home, and ultimately gives the fans the Gears experience they want. So without further ado, here are 10 things I think they should put in Gears 6 in order to make it that home run game that we've all been looking for as Gears of War fans. So one thing that stands out when I think about the old Gears games versus the new ones is just the dark and gritty vibe and even look of them. Most of us who started at Gears 1 fell in love with just how dark the game felt, literally, and how it looked as well too, between the lighting and just some of the development of the characters and the story elements. It really puts you in this feeling that you were really there with Delta Squad going through this just post-apocalyptic alien takeover world. And I know for Gears 5 at least, especially with the introduction of the open world system, it seems like they were trying to introduce more, vibrance and ultimately showing off these great worlds and this great development. And don't get me wrong, Gears 5 graphically looks fantastic. It's amazing. But I think in the process, maybe even in the introduction of the open world aspects, you kind of lost a little bit of that feeling of despair tied in with just ultimately peril that the original games kind of helped create. And they had a good balance as well, while they introduced good elements of gore and even just weight behind just a good headshot crunch or a chainsaw, through a locust, and then just taking on waves and waves of these things. There was also a little bit of humor baked in there that helped balance it out. It gave it a really good mix of danger and concern for the characters while also kind of picking the right moments to lighten it up and really allow you to breathe in between big scenes and big moments. So I think that's just something to take into Gear 6. Again, I know we don't know what the story really is about, but if they're able to create this darker vibe, I think back to when we first met the Krill or the Wretches or all the old iconic enemies we were first introduced to. Just even in the look, if you can create kind of that just darker with pockets of light, but just kind of, dark, gritty vibe to the game, I think it really helps create an element that brings us in, kind of like how a good horror movie or a good thriller can suck you into the moment, but also still provide enough vibrance to allow you to enjoy everything going on around you. Another thing I think about with some of the newer games is just a lot of the veteran or legacy characters kind of take a back seat to the new main cast. And it makes sense when you're trying to make them the stars of the show. But I think most fans at this point aren't very attached to the main group of JD, Dell, and Kate. I think there's not as much investment in them as there was in just Dom, Marcus, Cole, and Baird. And if you look at a lot of the requests that fans make for content and multiplayer especially, a lot of people are just essentially asking for skins and content for their favorite older characters. There aren't really a whole lot of requests for Kate and JD and Dell and just the new cast that didn't end up really hitting the mark with a lot of old and new fans, I don't think. So it'd be cool in Gears 6 to kind of see them bring back a lot of essential characters to the story at that point and tying them into the story somehow, giving them more epic moments to show they're not just kind of like old and decrepit and useless at this point. Because even Marcus, he's fighting alongside them, but he's kind of in like a backseat mentor position where he's not doing a whole lot. And I don't know, I think it just doesn't really do him justice or the story justice as much as it could. So if you think about just the idea of doing more callback moments to old references in previous Gears games, it could be anything to a Cole Train speech that really, takes us back to when he spoke about the Queen in Gears 2, or something like as stupid as, who wants toast? And, Marcus and Dom talking about, I like it crispy, just terrible impressions, but you get the point. Like, just callbacks to moments that will really bring out the nostalgia in us, I think will be a really cool add to Gear 6. Another idea is just more generational moments. At this point, a lot of father-son, father-daughter soldiers exist. JD and Marcus are obviously father and son. So having a fight scene where they're really like just back to back going at it, fighting with each other would be really cool. At this point, Cole has a daughter apparently, so him and his daughter, kicking some Locust ass and giving out a woo at the end would just, I don't know, I think that'd be cool. Or even like a Carmine moment where you see Clayton just going off and dedicating, a beatdown to all of his siblings. I don't know, that seems like just those kind of moments that give you goosebumps that I think will really set off the last game as far as like a bringing it home kind of thing. And also just being able to give a lot of these characters closure in a way that's cool and not just killing them off necessarily. Seems like it'd be a cool thing to just see in the new Gears game. Along with bringing back some of the old characters, I think one thing that Gears can really take advantage of at this point is a lot of the old comic book lore and content. As far as DLC goes, there's so much that they haven't talked about yet that's really integral to how we got to this point. I think Gears 5 did a good job at helping fill in the blanks for some of the information that we didn't necessarily maybe get out of Gears 2 being in the laboratory and understanding how, the Queen leaks back to the Locusts and how that all kind of leads into E-Day and all that stuff. I think Gears 5 definitely did a good job at incorporating that information into the games. And there's just so much other cool stuff that you could do DLC for, like Marcus when he was a young soldier fighting alongside, Carlos Santiago, or even, when they met Ty. Ty was apparently like a badass in the jungle, and obviously they ended up recruiting him for the COG, but just tying in all these moments to these characters that we know and love, you could have a whole bunch of content, I feel, based off of that. And it just seems like something that in Gear 6, in a flashback maybe, or even just like a side content kind of thing, it'd be cool to include and just help educate people on the real lore of some of the characters we know and love. Now that some of the campaign ones are out the way, we hop into the multiplayer, and I think this is where the bulk of the Gears fans really spend most of their time. So the first one that comes to mind, and this is really across the gaming industry at this point, is just better quality of the game at launch. And I don't mean that in a negative, just attacking way. I just think, a lot of us understand the gaming industry is very fast paced at this point, especially with how much gaming blew up in the past couple years. So, timelines are being crunched down and games are expected to be as good, if not better, than what they were before, and look better and perform better. So understanding all that, just there's a lot of games now at this point that when they launch, they're essentially unplayable for the first week or first couple weeks, and it's expected to have a couple of bugs. But Gears 5, for example, I just think back to how hard that launch was, and how many people probably dropped off because they really couldn't even get into the game and enjoy it. I think a lot of Halo players are seeing the same thing with Halo Infinite, obviously to a smaller degree, but this idea that the game will drop and we'll kind of fix it as we go along. I think a lot of players are okay with that, just as long as it's not major fixes that don't even allow us to connect to matches or get kills that we rightfully earned. And when I think back to Gears 5 and how the beta ran, it was actually very difficult to play the beta. You kind of stuck through it because you wanted the unlockables, but the connectivity was almost impossible sometimes. And you know, it's a beta, so you don't really take it that to heart. But the game came out, I think, within the next few months of the beta, which again makes you think you need more time to essentially work out all these bugs and all these issues. So for Gears 6, maybe just spanning that out a little more, allowing the feedback to kind of get baked into the game so that you can really iron out a lot of these things and fine tune them before the initial drop. That way you maintain a lot of your player base after just the first month or first few weeks. You know, I think it's good, obviously, to have a lot of people playing when the game first comes out. That's a great statistic to have. But I think a sign of a good game is not just how many initial players log in, but how many players you can keep lasting over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, throughout the life cycle of the game. How many fans can you keep really engaged throughout? On that same note, I think matchmaking is another thing that a lot of us have kind of struggled or had issues with, at least in Gears 5. You know, teams can vary between the highest level 30s, 40s, 50s prestige and people who literally just picked up the game. And I'm not exactly sure how that all works out. I couldn't tell you the background stuff that helps match up people in that sense, but you can imagine in a match where the skill levels aren't lining up that some games can be pretty one-sided, and ultimately people will lose interest in kind of hopping into a party. Let's say if you're not in a team full of friends or people you know, you could be in a game with some random people and essentially just they wipe the floor with you, and nobody really wants to do that on a consistent basis. Or worse, you end up in a lobby that puts you halfway across the world, which puts your ping in the hundreds or the thousands, and you really can't even literally play the game. So just more consistency in how your match made, you know, with local people or even with just skill levels. I don't know exactly how to get that, but just for the multiplayer purpose of that, you know, just making it more fair so that you're playing against people in your skill set, I think will do a lot for the player base as far as keeping people around and keeping people interested. So this next one is about content. And this is another one that I see a little bit in Halo Infinite as well. Just the content, I think, on a weekly basis or seasonally isn't just what a lot of people are really interested in. Some of it's kind of cringy, you know, some of the emotes are just kind of like, you know, it's not something that people are willing to really pay money for if that's what the expectation is. And even in a match, you know, I remember first turning on the game and at the end you kind of see the person standing there and they're just like, hello. You're like, what the heck was that? You know, or even just, I don't know, some of it's a little cringy, and a lot of it isn't worth either spending money on or really, you know, working to grind and earn. So just thinking about the kind of content people would really be willing to put hours into earning and grinding for, and then making it unique as well. You know, a lot of character skins, especially the Carmines, are just different colors or slight variations. And we're not saying that you have to spend hours and days and weeks on specific content just to say you spent more time, but just when you look at something you think, well, do I really need this or do I want this because it looks almost identical to this other armor? It doesn't really make you want to play longer. It doesn't really want to make you grind any more than you already are just for this slight variation of a skin that you probably didn't even want in the first place. And then as far as how often content, you know, gets out, you know, I don't know if there's a sweet spot for that, but one thing I think all Gears fans can agree on is that just without great content up front and at a cadence that kind of drip feeds it to the fans, I don't think you're going to keep a lot of people around. I feel like there's a fear that if you drop too much great content all at once up front, people are going to get bored and not want to play the game or not want to grind for it. But I don't think that's true. Nobody really has a problem with good content. And then obviously if they enjoy the game, part of it is playing for the content, but the other part is enjoying having the content and essentially being able to show it off in match after match after match. So people are going to stick around if they like the game. You don't have to worry about drip feeding kind of filler content in between weeks or seasons. You know, essentially if you give us a lot of cool stuff up front, especially just even stuff that is way cooler than what it was in the previous games, then I think you'll keep a lot of people around longer and just ultimately make people want to grind a little more. So this next one might be the most talked about or even potentially controversial. It has to do with just better rewards and leveling and just the store system. It kind of ties in with the content aspect of things, but with the way the industry's kind of moving, you know, obviously I've been gaming for a while, so I'm used to the game drops and then, you know, you put in hours and hours and hours and essentially you get, you know, some of those hard to get skins, like, you know, in Halo it'd be like you do this, get a samurai helmet or something like that, or just stuff that showed that like an achievement, you really had to earn that stuff. And I know that's not to knock the new system of things because it offers a lot of exclusive as well in a different way. I know microtransactions are pretty much here to stay at this point, but I think Gears 5 did a great job over its couple of years in improving the system in a way that seemed to work within both worlds. I think you still can introduce a system that allows you to grind and work for certain content while also having other content that, you know, essentially you charge, you know, real money for, and that, you know, you still make a profit off of some exclusive content that you really only have for a limited time in a store. The problem with that, as far as the way the current system works, is that, you know, you have iron, which you pay real money for in order to have that digital currency, versus coins, which if you just keep playing the game, you kind of earn the coins. And the way the current system works is when something comes out in the store, it costs iron, but if you wait a week, it costs coins. So essentially, if you can just stick it out for a week and grind to get enough coins, you don't really have to ever pay any real money. It kind of defeats the purpose of the iron besides having it as an option, which, you know, I get it. If somebody's going to buy it to have it now, then obviously why would you miss out on that money? It makes sense. But I think for Gear 6, there should be more content that's more difficult to get, that kind of shows that, you know, you earned this achievement or you really had to work and grind to get this thing without the option of putting it on the store later. There were a couple instances in Gears 5 where certain executions or certain character skins were essentially reintroduced into the store after having been in the tour of duty, and a lot of people didn't really take well to that, because why would we spend time grinding for it if you're just gonna charge money so that somebody else can buy it later? Kind of defeats the purpose of putting multiple hours into the game. Whereas when you look back at Gears 3, for example, Gears 3, as you leveled up, you just got more content. And so like if you were level 100, you had all the characters, you had all of the different variations of anything that could be introduced. And then with weapon skins, you know, depending on how you did with a certain weapon, this is in Call of Duty also, just depending on how you do with a certain weapon, how many kills you get or whatever, that essentially drives the skins you're able to get with that. So it's more skill based and kind of, you know, gives people more of a sense of pride that they're really earning and working towards just the things they unlock and can kind of show off. Now I know the tour of duty in a way is kind of essentially that progression system that gets you different levels of content, but sometimes it seems just like this challenge system introduces more arbitrary challenges, like killing a pouncer and escape, or I don't know, doing something in a mode that people just, when you want to play multiplayer, like if I want to say I got 1,000 kills with a long shot and now I have a diamond crystal clear motion long shot or something, that seems to be a lot more important than go do this thing for a star and then pay to have more stars to get it faster. Again, it defeats the pride and the real skill level involved in having to get content. And I think just reintroducing that, at least at some level, and keeping that content exclusive will really keep especially a lot of veteran Gears players, because, you know, again, a lot of us, we I got a lot of pride. I like to show off. Yeah, I did this, that, and the third. And it goes a long way when you can walk around saying, I did this and I have this, and somebody can't just buy it. So for Gear 6, just having some kind of experience-based, unlockable progression system, I think will really be a big improvement and a nice way to reintroduce elements of the original Gear stuff while still having certain things only available on the store for a limited time. I think you can have the best of both worlds. If you've been playing Gears over the years, you know that there have been a lot of multiplayer modes that have come and go and that have evolved. Some that come to mind are, original Gears started with Warzone, Execution, Assassination, which essentially just became Guardian, and Annex. And, a lot of those have, well, really all of those I think are pretty non-existent at this point, unless you bring back Execution. And then other ones that kind of came and went, like Submission, and, Wingman is a popular one. Then you have other ones like Arms Race, and the list goes on and on. I think the biggest thing is that I think Gear 6 should start with a strong core of multiplayer games that really the fans want and that they play the most. Some that stand out are Team Deathmatch, King of the Hill. In general, survey and poll the fans. Make sure you know which modes they truly, really want. And then keep the playlist. I think that's a good format of having the playlist style that matches objective-based game types with more kill-based ones, so on and so forth. But just make sure that the focus is on modes that are going to be often played and are really enjoyed. This may be more of a personal take, but I play a lot more objective-based ones. Like King of the Hill is my preference, but unfortunately when I go into that playlist, half the time I get stuck in game modes like Capture the Flag or Gridiron or Guardian when I really don't have any interest in playing those. Sometimes I might be in the mood for a certain kind of game type, depending on just what kind of mood I'm in. But 9 times out of 10, I feel like I get forced into game modes in a playlist that I just really don't want to play. And, somehow even if you can build that into like how it predicts which ones come up next in the voting process, you can essentially, I feel like, tie it in a way that gives the more preferred or the more often played ones more often, versus forcing us to go into like a Capture the Flag or a Gridiron and everybody's just gonna leave anyway, and then you have to play against bots. So if Gear 6 can kind of implement that structure, a strong core structure of multiplayer modes, I think that's a good setup to keep people engaged and just interested, at least in the mainline multiplayer modes. Now, even though there's a lot of game modes that have existed over the years that some have made it into new games, it would be cool to see maybe a new game mode or maybe a revised game mode. And I guess I'm hinting at this point something like, I don't know, just in my opinion, if you brought back something like Beast Mode, I think that would be really cool. And Beast Mode was in Gears 3, it was essentially a mode where there were some people on the COG team and some people actually played as the Locust characters, and you would go head to head. And I don't know, it was a cool, innovative concept, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And especially at this point, when you have so many different enemies between the mainline Gears universe of the first 3 games and even the newer enemies that have emerged in the last few games, you can do a lot with that. And I mean, how cool would it be to be able to play as a Brumac or as a Berserker? I think back to Gears 2 and the last level where you're on the Brumac and you're just mowing down locusts, and obviously you can't just be broken with it, but to have like that power again in like multiplayer and have your friends trying to fight you off, it just seems like it was a really cool concept that I think you could revise and bring it back. This may be one that not all fans agree with, but I don't know. I just feel like it'd be a cool thing to reintroduce to kind of bring in something new to the newer Gears games while also kind of calling back some of the older game modes and like in Gears 3 that some of us kind of really were tied to back in the day. Kind of a random thought, but just something, even if you had like a Dead by Daylight type vibe where you were General Rom and you had a special ability where you could control the krill at certain areas. And I don't know, just thinking outside the box to do little things like that that give you some exclusive locus abilities, but put you head to head with your friends to make some real fun moments. And not that Escape didn't hit home for some people. I know a lot of people who played the heck out of Escape and they leveled up a lot and it was great for them. For me personally, I didn't really feel like Escape was the mode for me, and it seemed like a lot of the challenges and just a lot of times it was kind of forced on us. So I think the focus should just be between all game modes, making sure it's what the fans want, especially in this game if it's supposed to be the last game in the series, which we still have to wait and see. But just a focus on what the fans kind of want in that aspect, even doing some of that research up front before the game comes out, which I'm sure it's probably in development right now, I think will go a long way when we finally get to the game. The last thing that I think will really make Gear 6 pop is having just good, memorable multiplayer maps. Now, Gears has had a lot of iconic maps throughout its history. Places like Canals, Blood Drive, Gridlock, just to name a few. Some people could argue that they're kind of tired of them, and they've been in every Gears game since 1, 2, 3, so, it makes sense. But just, I think having access to those maps, at least in the beginning, would be just nice in order to start off with maps that we like, to have a bigger variety. In Gears 5, I think the problem was there were only a handful of maps, new maps that we had, and so you felt like you were pretty much playing the same match every other match. And if you were to just include some of these older maps that you're eventually going to roll out anyway earlier into Gear 6, I think it would just give, in a weird way, a fresher play to how things are going on. At least give us breathing room between, if we're playing in a new Gear 6 map, to kind of have a couple of other maps and cleanse our palette before we jump back into the same game and the same game type and do that over and over and over again. So just the big thing is to poll the fans, survey what maps are really favorites. And I know it's hard to get a sometimes consistent take on that, because I know everybody kind of has their own favorite maps and moments that happen in each map. But just take a handful of them, look at some. I think Raven Down, funny enough, I've seen as a really requested map that, interestingly enough, didn't get brought into Gears 5, but that's one that, maybe you introduce into Gears 6 on top of like the other ones like, Mansion, or just some older ones that maybe weren't in Gears 5, and then older ones that are in Gears 5 that are loved, and you don't really have to do a lot to them. I know there's always a want to revise over time, what these maps look like as things happened in the world, and that'd be a good touch, but just more than anything, having the maps available, I think, is the important part. And as far as new maps go, kind of follow similar templates, maybe not copy paste, but just take from what works in these other maps. Canals, for example, is pretty straightforward. You start on both sides, you get the power weapon sniper in each side, you got one in the middle, and then you can play the sides. Even Gridlock, you start off, you get the power weapon on one side, power weapon on the right. You can choose which way you want to divide. Just stick to something simple. And for example, Hadou, I think that's how you pronounce it. That map for me didn't really hit home, and a lot of people I play with didn't enjoy it that much. It's visually stunning, of course, but it just, I don't know, it didn't really work. Too big, just a lot of layers and levels that didn't really feel like they were fun in a match. So just keeping the maps simple, straightforward, and just playing off of what worked in some of the iconic ones, as well as tying that back into the moments in campaign, of course. In the Mansion, we had just the big fight inside as we were kind of learning more about the history with Marcus and his dad and stuff. So being able to play off of some of these iconic epic moments in the campaign and then bringing that map into multiplayer, I think really works in tandem to help build more iconic moments and just ultimately make us as the players feel more connected to what's going on when we're playing in that map. And that's it. Those are 10 things that if they put it in the new Gears 6 game, if that comes out, hopefully when it comes out, I think that'll just make a world of difference to Gears fans, even people who have never played Gears before. I don't think you have to do a whole lot to get them interested. Just kind of show them what made Gears as great as it always has been, and people will come back, and veteran players will come back, and new people will get involved. And I think the theme of the game, obviously maybe biased because I'm a fan, but there should be a lot of focus on fan service, for lack of a better term. Bring back a lot of references that we saw in old games. Even tie it into the new characters, so it's not like we're just abandoning these new characters and this new storyline. You can tie them all in together in a way that continues and maybe wraps up the story and kind of cohesively builds more just epic moments. I really do think that it would be cool to have like a father-son showdown where JD and Marcus, assuming that's how your story went in Gears 5, if you got to the end, you know what I'm talking about. To have that kind of showdown would be cool, or like a Cold Train family woo. Like, can't tell me you wouldn't want that. And even like a mode, maybe like a beast mode, bring that back, and you can play as General Ron, for example, but you actually control the Krill. Like, just a couple ideas. Obviously, you can tell I'm very passionate about Gears, and if there's one thing I've learned about us fans, I know we obviously have a lot of requests and grievances, and that you can say what you want about Gears as it's changed, or even the latest game, but a lot of us still come back to the game just because we love Gears, and this is how much it's meant to us as a game. The gameplay is unlike any other, and it's just something we have a lot of nostalgic feelings towards, and we even continue to want to make more with the new games that come out. So let me know what you guys think in the comments about this list, whether or not I left anything out, what you think you want to see in Gear 6 that would kind of make it really pop as the next and maybe final Gears game. Who knows? Share it with your friends. If you like this video, drop a like, subscribe if you can, and I appreciate all the support. And if there's a Gear 6 in the making, guarantee I'll see you guys there. Take care.